Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today in support of the Emergency Unemployment Compensation Extension Act. I'm glad that a 3-month extension of unemployment insurance for millions in Minnesota and across the country was able to clear its first hurdle in the Senate, but our work, of course, is not finished. I'm here today to urge my colleagues in the Senate and the House to pass an extension to renew these critical benefits so that hard-pressed families in Minnesota and across our nation can keep their heads above water while they search for work. As I've traveled around Minnesota, I've heard from a lot of Minnesotans who want to work. I had a roundtable conference this weekend, on Friday. We had 3 women. And we had some workforce professionals. And these women are looking hard and have been looking. They're part of the long-term unemployed. And these were women who were working. One was in her 40s with 2 kids, 1 little kid, a 3-year-old child, single mom. One was in her 50s and one about my age, in her early 60s. And while they're looking for jobs, and we had a professional there who said one of the hardest jobs is looking for a job. And they need the unemployment insurance to stay in their homes and to put food on the table for their families. In the wake of the worst recession since the Great Depression, too many people had good jobs and worked their entire lives, and all these women had worked their entire lives, had 20, 30, 40-year careers. And now they're out of work, and they remain out of work. Unemployment remains high, and the long-term unemployment rate among workers who have been looking for work for at least 6 months has weighed down our economy. Today, there are 4 million Americans, 37% of the unemployed, who have been out of work for more than 6 months. This is the worst long-term employment since the Great Recession. And that's why we need to extend the emergency unemployment compensation. These workers, the millions throughout the country, are worried that they will lose their ability to pay for a roof over their heads and put food on the table for their families, for their children. For most Americans, state-funded unemployment insurance runs out after 26 weeks, and yet the average unemployment spell now lasts over 2.5 months longer. Emergency unemployment benefits provide up to an additional 47 additional weeks of unemployment insurance for those Americans who need it while they're looking for a job. When I talk about high long-term unemployment, these women, every one of them I talked to, were working very hard every day. One woman described it as saying, I'm looking 24 hours a day. I have my smartphone, and I'm hoping 24 hours a day that I get something. A response, an interview. Right now we have 3 people looking for every job opening, but that doesn't mean that when you apply for a job that there are only 2 other people looking. And these women were telling me every time they apply for a job, there's several hundred people looking. And very often they'll apply for a job that a company announces, and the company will hire someone from inside the company, which is great for that person. But this is not about people waiting for their unemployment to run out, then look for a job. That's not what it's about. Right after Christmas, 1.3 million Americans who lost their jobs and are looking for work, including 8,500 Minnesotans, lost this critical lifeline of unemployment compensation. And remember, these women I talk about, they paid in. I'm talking about 20 years working, 30 years working, 40 years in the workforce. And if we don't renew these benefits over the next year, that lifeline will run out for another 3.6 million people, including 65,000 plus Minnesotans. While Minnesota has been fortunate to have a lower unemployment rate than other states, I believe that the 65,000 Minnesotans who will lose benefits without an extension deserve our support as they are looking for work. Congress has never allowed special extended unemployment benefits to expire when the long-term unemployment rate is as high as it is today. In fact, at 2.5%, the long-term unemployment rate is nearly double the level when previous emergency benefits were allowed to expire. And the current unemployment rate of 6.7% is far above nearly all previous rates seen at expiration and is 1.1% higher than when President George W. Bush signed the current round of benefits into law. As I said, on Friday, I met with several unemployed Minnesotans, one of whom was already, I actually think 2 out of the 3 were affected by are not extending emergency unemployment insurance. I want to share a little bit of their stories, but also the stories of people who have written in, Minnesotans who have reached out to me about how failing to extend unemployment insurance will affect them. John from Cushing, Minnesota, wrote me in December, quote, "I am a 58-year-old sales and marketing professional that was laid off due to a forced reduction and have been unemployed for a year. I have not been able to find even part-time work. I have exhausted my severance package and most of my liquid savings just to cover financial obligations and essentials such as food and utilities. Additionally, I do not have any health care coverage as my income has been limited to unemployment compensation. Now that the federal extension is about to expire, beginning next week, I will have 0 income and no job offer pending. I would appreciate your support in doing what you can to reinstate federal unemployment extension in Minnesota, the federal unemployment extension in Minnesota. As for me personally, it is of extreme need, and I would expect many others around the country may also be in such dire straits." You know, almost half, I believe it's actually a majority of Americans, sometime in their life hit a rough patch. And our job is to be there for them. Debbie from White Bear Lake wrote, quote, "There are many of us out here who will run out of benefits next year and are still unable to find a decent job. I've been out of work over 4 months and I'm spending at least 5 to 6 hours a day, every day, looking for a job. While this may not seem that long, I am already concerned about my state unemployment running out and having nothing. The people that actually work are the ones that spend money to help the economy." She's right. We know from CBO that if we extend unemployment insurance, these people spend the money and it goes immediately out in the economy. And actually, CBO says that this will sustain about 200,000 additional jobs. If we don't do this, we will create 200,000 less jobs over the next year. Ann from Eden Prairie. I met with Ann on Friday. She wrote me, "I have unfortunately been unemployed since being downsized from a small consulting organization in April of 2013. I have been extremely active in my job search." Boy, has she. I will tell you. All these women were upgrading their skills. Some of them had gone back to school to upgrade their skills and are still not being successful in finding work. I've been extremely active in my job search, but have regrettably not found new employment. My Minnesota unemployment insurance ran out last week, and I applied for federal emergency unemployment compensation just this past week. I understand it's going to expire at the end of the month. She wrote me this in December. I ask you to please ask yourself what you would do to provide for your family. I have a 9-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son. I am the sole provider for my family. I volunteer extensively at the school and elsewhere in the community. She is a volunteer, she does that, but she also volunteers looking for a job. She's networking in her volunteer work. She's volunteering for a kid's school, for a 9-year-old school. The 3-year-old, she told me that the 3-year-old went to preschool 5 days a week, then 4 days, then 3 days, then 2 days, now 1 day a week. And how hard is it to look for a job when you have a 3-year-old? She says, I am not looking for a handout, nor do I believe that staying on unemployment insurance is in my best interest. But she says it'll at least allow me to make my mortgage payment, unquote. Doug from Bloomington wrote that he and his family will lose their home if we allow benefits to expire. Quote, I unfortunately lost my job due to the economy last March. Each position that I apply for has at least 500 candidates applying for the same position. If the federal unemployment extension is not approved, my family and I will be homeless within a month. I've even tried to apply for temporary positions, he says in quotes. However, they always reply that I'm overly qualified. We talked about this in this roundtable. We also had professionals there who are professional workforce people, and they're counselors. These people are working it. They can't, I had a woman in her 50s who said they won't take me at McDonald's because they figure if I get some other job, I'll leave, and it costs them the train. It really troubles me that those who have worked and contributed to our society the longest, I'm saying 20, 30, 40 years, have been particularly hit hard by long-term unemployment. In other words, older workers who lose their jobs have experienced longer periods of unemployment than younger workers. Part of that is age discrimination. That age discrimination has made it more difficult for older workers to bounce back when they lose their jobs. According to AARP, 34% of older workers seeking work reported they had experienced or know someone who's experienced age discrimination in the past 4 years. This was the experience of all 3 of the women I talked to. Extending unemployment insurance isn't just the right thing to do to help our fellow Americans who are out of work and searching for a job. It's also the smart thing to do for our economy. As I said, in 2011, the Congressional Budget Office stated that aid to the unemployed is among the policies with, quote, the largest effects on output and employment per dollar of budgetary cost, unquote. CBO estimates that extending benefits through 2014 will help expand the economy and contribute to the creation of additional 200,000 jobs. The Council of Economic Advisors estimates that without a full-year extension, the economy will generate 240,000 fewer jobs by the end of 2014. We know that unemployment benefits work. The Census Bureau estimates that unemployment benefits kept 2.5 million people who are trying to stay in the workforce out of poverty in 2012 alone, and have kept over 11 million unemployed workers out of poverty since 2008. And countless local businesses feel the positive effects when the unemployed are able to keep buying their basic necessities. food, utilities, gas, so they can drive to look for a job. Unemployment insurance isn't the only thing we should be doing to help the unemployed either. There are lots of things we can and should be doing. There are more than 3 million jobs in this country that could be filled today if there were workers who had the right skills. With too many Americans unemployed, we have to find a way to fill those jobs, to train those workers. We should be helping workers get the training they need to fill the high-tech jobs that are growing in Minnesota and across the country, in Maine, in Alabama. Every senator I talk to in this chamber, I talk about the skills gap, manufacturing returning to this country, but we don't have the skilled workers at a time with such high long-term unemployment. We need to be training a workforce for the 21st century, and sometimes this is advanced manufacturing. Sometimes this training takes 2 years. We need to do it. We should be helping connect these people to educational programs that link them with employers, and that's why I've introduced the Community College to Career Fund Act. Under this program, businesses and community colleges would apply for grants based on how many jobs that partnership would create, the value of those jobs to those hired, to the community, and how much skin the businesses have in the game. There's a lot that we should be doing to create jobs. We should be addressing our infrastructure deficit. You know, when you leave, when you don't repair our infrastructure, you know, when you don't create new infrastructure, that's a deficit too. And we need to get people into jobs that we need to be doing. But failing to extend emergency unemployment doesn't make sense. We shouldn't be punishing people like John and Debbie and Ann and Doug who are looking for work and can't find jobs. We shouldn't be pulling the rug out from under them and millions of others who support the small businesses and local retailers in our cities and our towns. Extending these benefits are something we should do now to jumpstart, to continue this recovery. We shouldn't stop there, though. I will continue to press this Congress to work to create jobs through investments in infrastructure, in innovation and education, so that the unemployed can get back to work in good jobs that sustain long-term economic growth.